Hey, so just in case you didn't hear, I created a new podcast called the If Then Podcast, and what you're about to hear is episode 1. I made everything from the logo to the script to the music, sound design, everything. I'm really proud of this, and the only way for other people to hear it too is if you help me get the word out. So listen to it first, and if you then feel so compelled to share it, I'm giving away free AirPods and Audible audiobooks. I am not sponsored by Audible. I just know that most everybody has done their free trial, so even if you have an account, you can use this gift card that I will give you that I have paid for. Again, not sponsored. Get the details at the end of the podcast, and let's just get into episode 1. I hope you like it. My name is Jordan Taylor, and welcome to the If Then Podcast. Our brains are a conglomerate of if-then statements, like in computer code, and oftentimes, new lines of code are hard to write in our mind when we're trying new things. For example, if I want to play piano, then I need to read music. Sitting down and coding that particular if-then statement could take years of dedication, but when we do sit down and create new then statements for a complicated if, it feels freaking amazing. This podcast is your weekly motivation and mine to get uncomfortable and write some neurological code. Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask. Act. Action will delineate and define you. Thomas Jefferson. I read this quote and a number of others that had this theme of not waiting, not thinking about who you are and what you should do, but simply acting and finding out along the way. I have a problem with psychoanalyzing every little thing that I do, and it can be a good quality sometimes, but more often a terrible quality other times, because I don't do anything. I've always wanted to start a podcast, just like every other human being on planet Earth, but I had no idea what I wanted this podcast to be about, or how to even make one, or who would listen, or how I would promote it, blah, blah, blah. But I was so sick of having those thoughts and not just doing it. I just wanted to act, and I would figure it out along the way. So I was at Target with my wife, and I was walking down the electronics section, and I saw a microphone and thought, that isn't the best microphone in the world, and I haven't researched which one I should get, and that would meet my needs, but then I realized that I just needed to act. I needed to stop researching, or have this promise of researching before I acted, and just do something. This microphone is a simple USB microphone, which is one of the easiest kinds for a beginner to use. And I chose that kind so that I would have the absolute least amount of friction between me and the podcast, the least resistance between me and acting. So I picked up the box and bought it. I went home and immediately forced myself to hook it up, and then I started to talk to some friends about my idea about the If Then podcast, because I had been thinking about how our brains really are just a conglomeration of if-then statements, like when I was learning C programming a couple years ago.
Hello?
Hey, I have an idea.
What I realized is things are only hard when we're actively trying to code an if-then statement into our brains so we can autopilot it next time we encounter such a problem. We have tons of these programmed in ourselves already. For instance, if dishes in sink, then dishwasher. If clean clothes, then fold. These seem simple enough, but when you think about how many if-then statements branch off from just both of these examples, you can see why a little kid has such a difficult time trying to do literally anything. If spoons in sink, then place here. If small bowl, then up here. If big bowl, then down here. If wooden spoon, then hand wash. If hand wash, use sponge and soap. If soap empty, then buy at store. If brought home, then fill bottle. Apply this same concept to something more complicated, like finishing an entire basement knowing next to nothing about carpentry and construction, and you can feel what a child feels every single second of the day. Constantly uncomfortable, constantly battling, struggling to code their minds so they can be something useful to themselves, to others. Maybe that's why I find children so inspiring. they're constantly forced to act in this if-then world I just reside in, with programs running without even knowing. Maybe we need to feel that uncomfortableness far more than we currently do. Maybe we need to write some new code. Maybe I do. So I opened up GarageBand, again, not the most professional tool to use to podcast, but it didn't matter. I just wanted to begin this whole uncomfortable process. I wanted to begin coding my brain instead of thinking about one day coding it. I began composing the music for the intro, and that was the first moment in this whole process that I really began to feel excitement. Up to that point, it was just dread and fear. If I hadn't gone through writing those initial uncomfortable if-then statements, forcing myself to not think and to just buy a cheap microphone, open GarageBand, and start trying to struggle to write, figure out how to buy a domain and make a little website like if-then podcast, sure, that sounds fine, I guess, it's pretty good. If I hadn't just started walking in a direction, even if it might be the wrong direction, I wouldn't have had that moment of, oh wow, I actually like this. I actually like this intro. I'm actually having a lot of fun doing this. Maybe I am going in the right direction. Or maybe I'm not going in the right direction. I don't know. But the point is that I'm actually walking. I'm actually doing something. Putting myself out there, just acting. Not overthinking, like, oh, I'll do that later when I have more time, or when I'm more prepared, when I'm safer. It's not fun to make the first if-then statements of a project, to take the first steps when you don't know if you're going the best route to a goal that you have in your mind. A good example of this I heard one time was, imagine you're stationary on land and you're wanting to go to the ocean. Now you don't know where it is, but you have to pick a direction. Or, well, I mean, I guess I suppose you could pick no direction at all and seal your fate that way, but who would do that, right? Well, a lot of us. But for the sake of the example, you actually pick a direction to walk because, hey, you might pick the wrong direction, but if you stay stationary, you have absolutely zero chance of reaching the ocean. So you start walking north, and it takes you months of walking over mountains, a desert. You almost die once. That was crazy. Massive storms, a hurricane. Wow, has it been 2 years of walking already? But eventually you hit the ocean, and you're so thrilled that you reached your goal. The thing you don't realize, though, is that at the start, if you had just gone south, if you had just turned around, you would have realized that you were only 100 feet from the ocean. In fact, you were already on the beach. So that seems really disappointing that you had to go through all of that walking. I mean, really, you almost died. That's pretty serious. But does it really matter? You still got there. And look, you're even happy. See, the thing is that no matter what direction you walk in, you will eventually hit the ocean. Guaranteed. Some directions you could have picked would have definitely taken you a shorter time, but at least you acted and eventually got there. You forced yourself to walk, to start the journey, to write the first if-then statement, and then the next, and then the next. And by simply making that decision to act, you sealed your fate. So I have no idea where this podcast is going to go. I have no idea if I'm going to interview people, how often. But for right now, I'm just going to push through this thing in my brain saying that I have to have it all figured out before I start. I want to push through my thoughts of what you have to say isn't valuable, which could more or less be very true, and it probably is because I'm not all that enlightening, but maybe if I keep doing it, maybe something I will say will actually end up being valuable. Because if I don't say anything ever, well, I'll never say anything ever. If I don't say a bunch of stupid stuff first, how could I possibly parse through my own thoughts to find something that helps myself even? So I'll leave you with this. Do you want to know who you are? Don't ask. Act. Action will delineate and define you. Thank you so much for listening to the first episode of the If Then podcast. If you have feedback you want to give me, or if you have anything that you want to say, email me at contact@ifthenpodcast.com. And if you would, leave me a 5-star review if you found this podcast valuable. It really helps to get it seen by other people like yourself. And as an extra bonus, for those of you who help me spread the word, I'm going to give away 2 free 1-month Audible gift cards every week this May. That includes a free credit for an audiobook of your choice, plus access to their Plus catalog, which includes thousands of audiobooks with no credits needed. And don't worry, this gift card is available to you even if you already have an Audible account. All you have to do to enter to win is take a screenshot of this podcast and share it on your Instagram while tagging the account If Then Podcast in the post or story. And also, be sure to follow If Then Podcast on Instagram to find out if you're one of the winners that week. If we get 100 shares by the end of the month, each of you will be entered to win a pair of AirPods. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Jordan Taylor, and what if then will you write today?